This is Journey to Chinese Fluency podcast, episode number 4.
Embarrassing moment, culture insights, proven methods to achieve Chinese fluency. Skip that learning curve with the Journey to Chinese Fluency podcast. Now, your host, Victor Yang.
Hey, what is up, everyone? Welcome to Journey to Chinese Fluency podcast. Our guest today is Andres Loret de Mola. Hi, Andres. Are you ready to share with us your journey to Chinese fluency?
Hi, Victor. Thank you for having me. Yeah, I'm very ready and excited to be on your show.
Fantastic. So maybe we start with tell us where you're from.
Sure. I am originally from a city in Mexico called Mérida, located in the Yucatan Peninsula. That's where I grew up and where I currently live.
Right. So what's your native language?
My native language is Spanish.
Yeah, I will assume so because everyone in Mexico speaks Spanish, right?
Yeah.
What other languages do you speak?
I also speak English and Mandarin Chinese.
Awesome. Where do you live now?
Right now, I go to school in Hudson, Ohio.
In the US, right?
Yes.
You're still studying in high school. Very young.
Yes.
How old are you?
I'm 18. I'm a senior in high school right now.
Right. You're very young. So why did you learn Chinese?
So basically, when I was 9 years old, my dad saw an ad in a local newspaper in my hometown, and he saw that there was a local school offering Chinese classes. And my father does business with China a lot, and he wanted me and my brother to take Chinese classes. And my brother eventually dropped out because he didn't like it, but I started taking Chinese classes because my dad thought it was a good idea, but I found that I liked it and I kept going by myself.
Wow, that's awesome. Your dad is really training you well, I guess.
Yeah.
Starting from 9 years old, that's a good age to start learning a language.
Yeah.
So how many years have you been learning Chinese for? Like, did you start learning ever since 9 years old?
I've been studying Chinese on and off, but I'd say it's about a total of 6 years now.
So after 9 years old, like just on and off, altogether will be 6 years around.
Yeah, that sounds about right, yep.
As you mentioned, your brother didn't enjoy and dropped out. And what's been motivating you? Like, what's been your biggest motivation?
So my biggest motivation is being able to speak with over 1 billion people in the world. I think it's pretty cool that by learning one language, I can speak to about 1/7 of the world population. So that's always a pretty good motivator for learning Chinese for me.
I would assume when you learn Chinese is a difficult language, or has it not been?
Well, I would say that for someone that speaks Spanish as a native language, it is a difficult language because it's so different in terms of grammar, the writing style, and the vocabulary, obviously. So yeah, it is kind of a difficult language, but I also found that I think I'm kind of good at learning languages. So I would say that I'm a little bit better at it than the average person.
Right. So has there been times where you find this is, too hard or this too much to memorize? I just want to know, like, apart from knowing the advantage of learning Chinese, what else has been motivating you? Because, there's a lot of people who start learning Chinese and after a while they get burned out or, they just can't go on with it. What's your secret?
There's really no secret. I mean, I love the language. I think that the history and the culture is very cool. The Chinese people are so friendly. Sometimes it's been a good tool in picking up some Chinese girls. I'm not going to lie. There's just so many things that you can access if you speak Chinese that it's just like an entirely different world than what I know that I can access just by learning one language.
Tell us how you learned your Chinese. What's been the most effective technique or method that's been working for you learning Chinese?
Yeah, so I find that for myself, reading a lot every day is a good technique to keep up with the vocabulary and everything. They say that practice makes perfect. So that I try to put that into practice. I read a little bit every day. I try to read different kinds of things, such as websites like Zhihu, which is a popular Reddit-like website. in Chinese. I read the news sometimes. And on top of that, I drill some vocab a few times a week in order to refresh my memory. And another thing that I would recommend people to do is if you have Chinese friends, bother them with questions endlessly, ask them a lot of questions. And if you don't have any Chinese friends, try to find some Chinese friends. I find that talking to native speakers is the best way to clear up any doubts you may have that can't really be solved with a dictionary. But it's also a good habit to, check a dictionary if you're wondering how to say something in Chinese or if you don't know a word. Really, those things are all very good that I know have helped me in the past with my Chinese learning.
Right. So talking to Chinese friends, making Chinese friends, and also reading articles online, is that your method?
Yeah, that's basically what it boils down to.
Does it mean like you need to learn enough vocabulary of Chinese in order to read those stuff online?
Well, the thing is, I would say that because Chinese is such a different language than like English or Spanish, I think that the threshold for knowing enough vocab to actually be able to read an article in Chinese is maybe a bit higher than it would be for other languages. So before you can get to the level of reading an article in Chinese, you really do have to drill the vocab and know the words and how to use them. And that can be a tedious part of it. But in the beginning stages, I would say focusing on vocab memorization is a key to learning Chinese.
Right. So what has been your technique of memorizing the vocab? Like, is there a special way you do it?
One of the first teachers I had in Chinese, what she would do every day is give us a quiz on about 10 to 20 vocab words, and she would have us write the characters about 10 times each for homework the night before, and she would have us write a sentence with the vocab word, and then she would quiz us the next day on them, and we'd have to use it in a sentence and know how to write the characters. So really, in terms of getting the characters down and memorizing them, there really isn't a better way than just literally sitting down with a piece of paper and the pen and just writing and writing and writing.
Right. So basically your method is more of a repetition way of memorizing, reinforcing that.
Exactly.
With a lot of revision, I guess, as well.
Right. Exactly.
We all know like Chinese is the tonal language. A lot of people learning Chinese, they're having difficulties hearing, understanding, and also be able to pronounce the tones properly. Has that been a problem or issue for you?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, anyone listening that has learned Chinese for even a day knows the struggle that it is to try to learn a tonal language if you don't already speak one. I mean, yeah, in the beginning, getting the ma down is definitely such a hardship, and it can be discouraging because you're not going to be understood for a lot of the times if you don't get the tones right. So that's definitely one of the hardest parts of the language.
Right. So how would you recommend our listeners to improve or just to learn the Chinese tones and the pinyin?
Right. So this is actually something that I've read up a lot about online mostly, and I've asked different Chinese teachers that I've encountered and met over the years. And what I personally think, and this is I'm not by no means an expert, but I find that some people say that learning the tones later and focusing on the pronunciation at a later stage is good, because if you focus on that in the beginning, you might get burnt out and give up. I think that's a wrong approach. I actually think that you should try to learn the tones as you go, but not get don't stress too much about it if you don't get it right in the beginning. I don't think that you should skip them altogether. Some people just say, oh, yeah, I'm just going to learn how to say the words and not focus on the tones and learn them later. But what people don't understand sometimes is that the tone is an important part of the word. It's not really a word if you don't use the tone. You know what I'm saying?
Mm.
So I think that people should focus on that in the beginning, but not not get bogged down by it and let it ruin the wonderful experience that is learning Chinese.
Yes, you've mentioned a very important part of learning a language, I guess, is to avoid getting learning too much stuff at the same time, and then eventually you get burned out. I think that's important to every language learner to keep in mind. So how much time have you been dedicating on learning Chinese every day?
My Chinese learning has really sort of stepped outside of the classroom because I've done that I did that for so long that I feel like speaking in Chinese to my Chinese friends and reading up online is a good way to maintain everything that I've learned and keep learning as well. So my Chinese learning nowadays is mostly just practicing the language, speaking it, reading in it, and a couple of times a week, like 2 or 3 times a week, I will sit down for about an hour and a half or 2 hours and drill vocab words. That's pretty much the routine that I have right now.
Do you still spend as much time now, like to study Chinese, or you're already past that stage?
I think that I don't really consider what I do with Chinese right now studying per se, so much as just enjoying the language and using it. Because I think that I've met a lot of Chinese learners that have studied Chinese like me for a long time. I've met people that have studied it for way longer than I have and are way better than I am at the language. But I think that a point that a lot of students of Chinese miss is that there has to come a point where you learn to enjoy the language, and you just speak in it, you read things in Chinese, and you just genuinely enjoy using the language, because I think that's the point of learning a language, using it for communication and in daily life, and not worrying too much about the actual vocab drilling, the actual having to memorize the characters and all that.
That's a great point. Enjoying the language, that's also very big motivation, I guess, for anyone learning the language. If you enjoy what you do, if you enjoy learning a language, the time is no longer an issue. But if you don't enjoy even, just 5 minutes, it can be painful.
Yeah, I agree.
What have been your biggest challenge in learning Chinese, and how did you overcome it?
Wow, that's a very deep question, because there are so many challenges that come with learning the language. But I think that just focusing on what you're doing at the moment, keeping your head down and not trying to see everything at once, just focusing sometimes on what you're doing right now is good. And if you ask me about any specific difficulties that I've had, for example, sometimes I feel frustrated when I go online and run into an article, like let's say on Zhihu, right? And I find that I know all of the characters and I know all the vocab words, but sometimes online slang is so different from like formal articles or what people say in real life that I don't understand what's going on, even though I recognize every single character on the page and I know all the words on the page. Anything that really has to do with like sort of modern slangy language, I don't understand it, and it's very frustrating to think, wow, I've been learning this language for such a long time now, and there are certain settings in which I'm very good at using the language, but at something that's as simple as, cracking a joke online or like trying to speak it casually, sometimes I get very frustrated when I can't understand it, and that's always a letdown. But I mean, I welcome it as a challenge, and I don't let it become an issue for me. I welcome the challenge, and I try to figure out what's going on, and I enjoy doing that,
Yeah, that's definitely a good point. I totally understand where you're coming from, because as a native Chinese, I had to learn English, and I always come across English slangs and the slangs in the English text, which, I find confusing as well. So I guess we're in the same shoe, and we're always constantly challenged by all these things. The thing is, we have to just move on and have to learn it. So share with us an embarrassing or funny moment in learning Chinese.
2 years ago, I did a year abroad in China. I studied in Beijing for my sophomore year of high school. And early on in the year, I was highly motivated to go out into the city and speak Chinese and use the language and interact with the locals. And once I remember going into a store nearby my school, And I went inside and I wanted to buy napkins, which, as you know, in Chinese is 卫生纸.
Right.
But but at the time I wasn't quite good at actually you know pronouncing Chinese words. So I ended up asking the store owner if I could buy some 卫生巾, which means tampon in Chinese. So here comes in this 16-year-old Mexican kid and awkwardly asks the store owner in broken Chinese if I can buy tampons. And the store owner just looks at me and starts laughing. And that was kind of embarrassing, but thankfully the guy understood what I meant and he knew that I was trying to say napkins, obviously, because obviously I have no use for tampons. So
Yep.
that was a pretty awkward and funny story that I look back fondly upon right now.
Yep. I've actually heard about a similar funny moment like that before. To be honest, even some Chinese, they make that mistake. So,
Really?
yeah, so you're not the only one. So apart from the embarrassing moment, let's go to a high note. So share with us a success story, a most rewarding moment after you have become fluent in Chinese. And what are you doing with your Chinese now?
Okay. So last summer, I spent a month in China at a language school to improve my Chinese. And that school was in Beijing. And one of the weekends I was there, I took a train to Xi'an to see the terracotta soldiers, which anyone that goes to China should visit. It's an amazing place to go. And I came in to the train station on a Friday night, and I took a taxi from the train station to my hotel, which ended up being about an hour away. So it was a pretty long taxi ride. And I started talking to the taxi driver, and it popped into my mind to try build like this fake persona and this fake identity of my background and why I was learning Chinese and how I knew Chinese to see if I could, have a good time to see if I could pretend to be someone that I wasn't using my Chinese and not stumbling with the language and seeing if I could succeed. And so I ended up telling the taxi driver that I was actually half Chinese, that my dad was Mexican, but my mom was Chinese, and telling him that I grew up in Mexico, but I had actually moved to China a couple of years before that. And I told him this when he asked me how come I knew Chinese so well, because I was clearly a foreigner. And so when I told him that I was half Chinese, he said, well, that makes sense. I mean, otherwise your Chinese wouldn't be so good. So managing to fool him into thinking that I was actually half Chinese, only using my language skills was a very satisfying moment, and it was definitely a turning point in my sort of Chinese language learning career, and I look back fondly upon that.
Wow, that's a great moment. So what are you doing with your Chinese now?
So right now, basically, I'm studying for the sixth level of the HSK, which is the Chinese Language Proficiency Exam. And I'm trying to see if I can pass that final level of the exam and hopefully having the credentials to maybe try and get some internships or a job in the near future with a Chinese company. I would love that. That's sort of my mission right now with my Chinese.
Right, awesome. So you're looking into working in a Chinese company and utilizing your Chinese to a more fuller extent.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if I can make some money off of my Chinese, why wouldn't I,
Getting all the education expense back.
Yeah, definitely.
How would you compare your life before you have learned Chinese and your life after you have learned it?
I would say that before I really found that I was good at learning languages, because I started learning Chinese and I enjoyed it and I learned it pretty well, I'd say. I'd say that honestly, I have a passion now. Before I studied Chinese, I didn't really have any passions in life. I just sort of, woke up, went to school, hung out with my friends and everything. But there was no greater purpose in my life. Nothing that I had for myself that I wanted to work on, and nothing that I wanted to aspire to. But after I found Chinese, I found my passion, and that's sort of an integral part of myself right now, and my defining characteristics, I'd say. So Chinese has changed my life in that way, in that it sort of gave it another purpose.
Yeah, that's definitely a very, very big difference in your life, I guess. I would be interested to know like the difference between your life and your brother. Like, did you say your brother that dropped out learning Chinese?
Yes.
Does he regret it?
I haven't spoken with him at length about it, but I don't think he regrets it. Um, I mean, he dropped out because he didn't really like it, but he's never really said to me, I regret not learning it or anything. I just think that he feels that, learning Chinese or something like that, learning another language isn't that important to him. I don't think it's been a major source of regret for him.
But it's definitely a big plus for you.
Yeah, exactly, which is wonderful.
Yeah, I remember like when I just came to Australia, I was still speaking broken English and all my focus was on learning English. And then at school, we were required to learn another language. And at that moment, I had to learn Indonesian. I learned a bit of Indonesian, but I wasn't really interested in it. So I didn't continue. But now when I look back, I would really love the opportunity to learn another language apart from just Chinese and English. Learning another language, if you can, that would be a very good gift for yourself in the future.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's definitely an investment that can bring big rewards and payoffs in the future if applied right. And yeah, I mean, I would say, you're not too old to learn another language. You can always start today. I
Yep.
always think that anyone that wants to learn a language should. If you want to and have the time, that's all that matters. Doesn't matter how old you are or where you are or anything else. You should just go for it.
Cool. Share with us one special thing about the Chinese culture that is different to your own culture.
Okay. So one thing that it's very apparent from Chinese culture coming from Mexico is that China values the collective over the individual. And in Mexico, like in the States and a lot of other countries around the world, people value individualism over the community. But I find that in China, it's actually the reverse. Chinese people value the good of the community over the individual. And so whenever I'm interacting with Chinese people, I kind of always feel like a little bit selfish because I see that they do so much for their friends, for their community, for their parents. They don't focus as much on their own self and they try to do more for others than someone from Mexico would. And that's very humbling to see and learn. And it's something that I think that has enriched my life. And I find that I am more conscious about doing something that is only going to benefit me versus doing something that can benefit those around me.
Yep, I still remember when I was young, when I was studying in China, that is one of the virtue that we are taught as students to bring honor to the community, to the group that you are in, rather than just benefiting yourself. So that's definitely one of the Chinese culture thing that's different to the Western culture.
Right.
Share with us, what's your favorite city in China?
I'd have to say that my favorite city in China is definitely Xi'an. There are a lot of things to see there, like the terracotta soldiers that I mentioned earlier, the old city walls, the great food, the old architecture. That's definitely my favorite city in China.
Great. Is there a tool, an app, or a website that you cannot live without in learning Chinese?
Oh yeah, there are definitely a couple that I think are super important and quintessential to any Chinese learner. I go on Plico a lot, which is a dictionary that a lot of foreigners use for Chinese. I've also learned from my Chinese friends to use Youdao Cidian, which is the app that most Chinese people use. I also find that going on the website that I mentioned, Zhihu, is very fun and entertaining as well. And one thing that I have to give a special shout out to, though, is the Chairman's Bow, which is a website that is a news website that writes articles in Chinese aimed at foreign learners of the Chinese language. So the target audience is not is actually not Chinese people, but foreigners that are learning the language. And what I like is that they have different articles that they with different levels of difficulty. And so if you're a beginner, you can read something that's easy, or if you're an advanced learner, you can read something that's more up to your level. So definitely, I would like to give a shout out to one of the co-founders, Sean McGivney, which is a great guy that I've spoken to and gotten to know over the past couple of weeks. And he is definitely an inspiration, because he told me that he lived in China for a while, and just this cause of trying to make it easier for other people who learn Chinese is something that I deeply respect. And I go on the Chairman's Bow every day and read it. I would say that that's my favorite tool.
That's a very interesting website. Can you repeat the website again?
Yeah, so the name is thechairmansbow.com. That's BAO, thechairmansbow.com.
Right, chairmansbow.com. All right, I'll put all the resources you just mentioned in our show note for today. So if you are to recommend to our listeners only one book in learning Chinese or the Chinese culture, what would that be?
So I haven't really finished the book yet. I'm currently in the process of doing that. But there's an author from, I believe, Taiwan called San Mao that has a story called Sahara de Gushi, or The Story of the Sahara. And it's a novel about a Chinese woman that marries a Spaniard, and they go to live in Africa. And it's a really simple novel that uses simple language that a lot of people recommend as a first novel when you're learning Chinese. So I would say that's definitely the first full-length novel that anyone that has had some success with Chinese and wants to really read a full-length text, I think that's what they should check out.
That's a great recommendation. San Mao is actually a quite famous author in China, I would say. Teach our audience one of your favorite Chinese quote or phrase or expression.
Okay. I actually have two of them, which are very brief, and I'll share the first one with you. The following is a quote, I believe, from the Analects, which is a text of Confucius' sayings, and it goes, 有朋自远方来，不亦乐乎, which roughly translates to, if a friend comes from afar, is that also not enjoyable or joyous? And the way it was explained to me was that basically Confucius here is talking about the joy of seeing a friend that you have not seen for a long time. And having gone out of my hometown and living abroad for a couple of years now to study high school, I can definitely understand what he's getting at here when I see a friend that I have not seen in such a long time, just enjoying the experience of seeing them after such a long time is something that resonates with me. And the other one is just really simple. It's 活到老，学到老, which means live until you're old and study until you're old, which is a sort of, I use that as my motto when for learning Chinese. As long as I live, and if I grow up to be really old, I'm going to study until I'm really old.
Really, really good quotes. 有朋自远方来，不亦乐乎. And the other one is 活到老，学到老. If you are to give our audience one single piece of advice in learning Chinese, what would that be?
I would say, honestly, just put in a little bit of effort every day. Learning Chinese can seem like a daunting task at first. And if you just chip in a little bit of time, however much you can dedicate it each day, you'll find that eventually you'll get to a place where you're really happy with the language. You're not going to feel like, you have to learn so many characters or have to wait so many years before you're finally able to use the language. Eventually, if you just put in a little bit of effort every day, you'll be surprised sooner rather than later that you can suddenly use the language in ways that you never thought you would.
That's a fantastic advice. So just to keep learning Chinese consistently and persistently, and eventually you'll get there.
Exactly.
So just before we let you go, How can our listeners reach you if they have more questions or they just want to talk to you about learning Chinese?
I have an email that that your listeners can reach me at, and I believe I already sent that to you, and you can post it on your website. If anyone listening has any questions or wants to reach out for some advice or just talk or practice your Chinese, I'd be happy to get in touch with you.
Thank you so much for coming on our show today. Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you, Victor.
To our listeners, the show note is now available at ChineseTalkEase.com/4. TalkEase is spelled as TalkEze. Do you know how to order food in Chinese? In just a few short video lessons, you will have the confidence to walk into a Chinese restaurant and order your food in Chinese. Just head over to ChineseTalkEase.com/order-food. TalkEase is spelled as TalkEze. How good is your pronunciation? I was born and raised in Beijing, China, and I have put together a short video series that will teach you how to pronounce 5 of the most difficult Chinese pronunciations perfectly. Just head over to ChineseTalkEase.com/pinyin. That is PINYIN. If you have enjoyed the show, please leave us a review on iTunes. Each month, I will choose one reviewer and give out a 1-year subscription to all my premium video lessons for free. That's it for now. I will see you in the next episode.